Onions are considered a universal vegetable, as they are utilized globally in almost every cuisine, and California is a leading producer of onions in the U.S. In this video, we will observe how onions are grown from seed, learn about their fertilization, irrigation, and pest management, and discover the many steps required when harvesting the bulbs.
Hello, I'm Lori Folletta, and I am the Onion Production Manager here at Real Farms Gill's Onions in King City, California. And I've been with the company now for 7 years, almost 8. And currently we're out here, like I said, in King City, talking about the planting going on. But before we get into that, I'd like to give you a little bit of a history about Gill's Onions. It started back in 1983. Steve Gill and David Gill were introduced by a salsa company having onions as their ingredient. So they started out in their backyard in Oxnard, California with 33 acres, and they currently have expanded to 2,000 acres that we have. And our 3 growing areas are Brawley, California, Bakersfield, California, and King City, California. And so all 3 of those growing areas produce 2,000 acres of onions for us each year. Right now, we are planting in King City, and our planting months are February and March, and a little bit in April. And these onions will be harvested in September and October. And we will also be starting our Brawley harvesting. We planted those varieties in October. We have 15 days there that we plant, and we're currently going to start harvesting those in, like I said, 2 weeks. Okay, all our onions are grown on 80-inch beds, 10 lines per bed, and our seeds are spaced, the yellows that we grow are spaced 4.5 inches apart, and the reds are currently being planted 3 3/4 inches apart. And the seed depends on the soil type, but we plant at a 1/2 inch depth to 5/8 of an inch, no more than that. You want it close to the surface as possible, but like I said, it all depends on the soil type. And starting with our seed, we grow different varieties, short day, intermediate day, and long days. This area, we just plant long days. And with our coating process, we have a local company that coats our seed, and it's a Farmore treatment, which has 3 fungicides and 2 insecticides. And we have a special coating that goes on there, and it enables us to get the protection from any fungus or any insects that could occur. And currently our main problem we have is damping off and any bulb mites. So with that coating process, it enables us to steer away from it. And like I said, it's a really nice, we tried different coatings in the past, but this seems to be the best one for protection from any soil-borne diseases, damping off, like I mentioned, and any insects that could occur. And it's a nice placement coat that enables the seed to drop exactly where we want it, which is 4.5 inch spacing to 3 3/4 spacing. So like I said, currently we are planting here. This is a 20-acre block, and a day's worth, this planter guy could do 40 acres, so he could do 2 blocks today, which he will be after this block. He'll jump to another block and finish it off. As far as tractor speed, it all depends on the soil conditions. He's currently probably going 3 miles per hour, no more than that. Very slow process, but like I said, it all depends on the soil conditions and the type of soil we have. The heaviest soil type that we have would be a mucky clay soil, and that is where we really have to slow down. But we have various conditions down in the desert, and actually in Kern County and Bakersfield, we have very sandy soil. So we really have to watch the placement of the seed and our tractor speed there, because the seed will drop. But when we get over here, we do have some of these heavier clay loam soils that we have to reduce the speed as well.
Hi, my name is Carlos Perez Jr. I'm a ranch manager for Real Farms. We ranch out here 2696 acres, 2,000. Our bread prep for all this onion that we're doing out here for Gill's onion started off with a couple of some disking out here, product that we had here before. After we determine where our lots are going to be for our onions, there is a 5-year rotation. So onions have not been placed in this lot for 5 years. After we finish disking, we'll let the ground sit for at least a couple weeks, making sure weather is allowing us to get back into it and work it. We'll go ahead and list it. We'll break it down a little bit finer, and we'll start doing all of our bed prep after that. The bed prep is mostly done by working it with a Lilliston, a bed shaper. Sometimes we'll even go in there and we'll mulch. But luckily we had a little bit of rain this year, and we went ahead and it just ended up doing a little bit of bed shaping on top, and we broke it down to where it was fine enough for them to put in a planter. The smaller the ground, the finer the ground, the easier the 42 lines will end up placing in the centers of the beds. If not, a lot of the dirt clods get caught in between the lines where they're planting, and it disrupts them from them ended up being in the center of their lines. Yeah, a lot of work. As you can tell right now, you can see on the film that we're breaking bottoms. Once we start watering this ground, you'll see that the water will seep through the beds where the tractors have been going through. So it allows the water to go all the way down so it doesn't sit on top of the furrows. So yeah, there's 10 lines.
5 on each side.
Yeah, 5 on each side. So yeah, the spreading of the shoes, what they call the shoes inside. So if the rocks or the clods are too big, it'll get caught in between, and it won't let it plant. It'll be an uneven plant. You'll see it when it starts coming out. They'll be zigzagged. So by us having the prep done a little bit better, a little bit finer, and there is sometimes that we do a mulch, but not very often. As long as our bed prep is correct, as long as our implements are done correctly, on time, breaking it down slowly, then we will get a fine bed just like this, as you can tell.
And so when you mean say mulch, you mean a power mulcher?
Yeah, we have a big 80-inch, it's a 380-inch mulcher, and it has 172 teeth inside, and it goes down about 2 inches, and it'll start hitting the top of the bed. It doesn't allow it to do it too deep, so we can break it up so we have somewhere to plant. We don't want to put too much work because it'll make it concrete underneath, and then the roots won't dive straight down to look for their water. So the softer we can have it down at the bottom, a little bit finer up on top so we can plant. Makes it a lot easier for, we have a better stand in a lot of our product. It just not for onions, but for everything else. We usually try not to plow. Plow is used after a brassica has been done. Cauliflower, broccoli, anything with the thick roots. Sometimes lettuce, some lettuces have real thick roots. Those are the times that we will plow. As long as our rotation is correct, that the root will have time enough to break down in the ground. So the plow comes in after, if this would have been a broccoli field or a cauliflower field, yes, we would go ahead and do our plowing, and we would throw the dirt from the bottom up to the top, and then we would work the ground. So that roots will end up going at the bottom, because from there, this would end up going into a lettuce or a spinach or a spring mix, and you don't want to find any of the roots inside those machine harvests. If it was a hand harvest, it'd be different, but if it's going into to machine harvest, the plow would help us hide a lot more of that root and have more time for it to decay underneath the ground. And we're also bringing the new minerals up on top, and leaving everything that was on top down to the bottom. And that's where the plow would come in.
Actually, if you watch him, you can see that he is constantly turning back to make sure that the planter, see how the wheels are, that they are touching the ground, because if those wheels are not touching the ground, no seed is dropping. So you see him constantly checking behind him to see if those things are touching the ground.
The pre-emergent for the water. It all depends what they're putting on. Depends on what's on the crop. Yeah, they'll come back and they'll put a herbicide. Like tonight, they'll do it all tonight. They'll come out. That gentleman that just went by right there, that's one of the guys who comes out here. He knows what's being planted by me communicating, which I was trying to tell him right now. There's certain areas where he's not going to be able to mulch the chemical into the ground, so they might have to spray it up on top. So there's re-entries of 24, 48 hours, up to 12 hours also if there's in there. And it's just a herbicide that they put over the top so they can seal it. And then we are allowed, after the hours that they're telling us to go in, then we're allowed to spray our water, do our irrigation to seal it. And that'll go down into a couple of inches into the ground, and it'll seal whatever's coming up, new growth that's coming up, but it will not affect the seed. The guys come in on a tractor with booms, and each boom on one side will take up 5 beds, and there's a boom in the center that takes up 2 beds, and then the other one will take up the other 5. So they come in with these giant booms after the mixture, and that's all done by our PCA, Joe. And he'll come in there, and he'll give them the rate and the acres. I give them the acres, and they'll come in and they'll spray, and then they'll sit for 48 hours. This was 48. We just had one over there for 48 hours. So nobody really can go in there without their proper PI, you know.
And then you'll irrigate.
And then we'll irrigate.
So you let the herbicide
sit for 24, 48 hours.
Turn on the sprinkler.
Yes, yeah.
And then you're going to sprinkle for how long?
The first water shot is usually 6 hours, and we try to do it early in the morning where there's no wind. And then we'll wait for a day, and then we'll hit it again for 8 hours. And then we'll let it sit, and then we'll check it to see how far the moisture is down, and then we'll come back and do another 6 hours. And then by that time, we're either putting on some of our fertilizer that we have to put in there. And once again, it all depends on our testing. We'll go ahead and throw on a fertilizer on there, and then we'll let it sit. And we'll check it again to see where the moisture is at. And we just keep checking it until we know where the moisture will maintain. And then we'll add another 6 hours. So it ranges between 6 and 8 hours, our watering for our onions.
And that you'll do that the whole season?
The whole season, yeah, the whole season.
Actually, our biggest weed problem, we have broadleaves, but our biggest problem to combat is nutgrass. We continuously fight that all year long up until, and I wish we had a field so I could show you just how we have to burn it back. And you think this toxicity is bad, it'll just completely yellow the onions out. But yeah, nutgrass is the worst weed we have here. In the valley, yes, some nutgrass fields, but mostly broadleaf, but not as bad as what we have here. We continue.
Onions down in Human and Imperial.
Imperial, we have some weeds, you know, but broadleaves, again, you know, if they're next to the river bottom, then of course we'll have the nutgrass. But I think this is probably the biggest area where we have the herbicides that we need a broad range of fertilizer, or excuse me, broad range of herbicides for our weedy fields that we have here, because we just have a wide range of weeds.
The herbicide that we put on, it's not a herbicide, it's a fertilizer. It's a heavier dose of a fertilizer. And what we do, we have to wait when it's a warm day, so the onions will create a wax. Every onion creates a small wax layer to protect itself from the heat. So we have to time it just right in order for us to put that fertilizer on top to burn the nutsedge down here at the bottom. I mean, we still get the tops that will burn, but it's a lot better of us knocking this down, because it'll grow taller than the onions, and then we can't find the onions. So it's more cost for us to bring in people to start cutting it and getting rid of all the weeds out of there. So we'll do this part of it, and it makes for a cleaner field, less costs, brings down my cost on my acres.
And you're also fertilizing.
And we're also fertilizing at the same time.
Here we have a field that was hit with herbicide probably 4 days ago, and for us to come in with the herbicide, we have to have these dry conditions and for the herbicide to take effect. The onions are at the 4-leaf stage, so as you can see, the herbicide actually left some little phytotoxicity, but that's pretty natural at this stage, and they'll eventually grow out of it. So as of today, we'll be sprinkling irrigation for it to come back, because it is pretty dry down here. And you can see on some of these weeds about how the herbicide took effect from the top on down.
The fertilizer that we use it through our irrigation. We have tanks that are set up with small pumps, and we'll go to our booster pumps, and there's connections that we've put on to certain lines. Sometimes they have, like, I hope I can say this, the little nipples that we put on our irrigation pipe, and we'll pump that the fertilizer through those with little small motors, and it'll go out through all the irrigation. And you have to have it up to a certain amount of pressure, so you're having a good coverage, because you don't want to have any spots that are not getting covered, because then the plant doesn't grow. So we'll wait. It takes about a good half an hour for us to get a good pressure, and then we'll go ahead and start fertilizing. And then after the fertilizer is gone, we have a guy sitting there waiting for it to go by. And once it goes by, and then about 20 minutes, enough till we can get some clean water through there, wash it all out, and we'll turn it off. So everything that all the fertilizer, it sits on top. It's not being flushed, because we're just throwing it away if we're flushing it. So it's easier for us to do it that way. So it's the safest way of us burning down some of this nutgrass.
Does the fertilizer actually kill the nuts for the nuts?
It will not. It will not. But it'll stun it enough to where it takes a long time for it to grow.
And in the meantime, the onions can then grow.
They'll go to the maturity, yes. Yeah. They'll grow to the maturity, and then after a while, then when they start laying down, then we'll go by and we'll start chopping them, and they start coordinated with the onions, and we'll start chopping them down, and there's not a lot of nutgrass. So then when they're picking it up, it's not bunching up and causing more problems.
Do you use overhead sprinklers the whole season?
No. We get it up to a true leaf, what we call a true leaf. We get it up to a certain size, and it all depends on what they're asking us to do. Lori from the onions, they'll let us know right away, and we kind of understand now. We've done it long enough that we know the height. We want to make sure that we have enough height that we can hide the drip tape, and I'm not trying to hide it. It's just enough to where it's sealing that tape inside, because if it's too small, then with the torrential winds that we have out here sometimes, that tape will end up in 3-4 blocks away. So for us, in order to do it correctly, we have to give it a size. This is a good block of an example. The beds are running from west to east. So for us to put a tape when it's very small, that tape would be down 3-4 beds away or another block. So we have to let it get a little bit bigger so it can trap the wind and the tape can sit down. Now, 110, our block 110 runs from north to south. So it doesn't matter the size. Once we get a good size in there, we can put the ring, because of the wind being that it blows from north to south, it doesn't move a lot of our drip tape. So there's 5 lines of onions, and we try to go ahead and put one down, a couple beds in. Once again, this all happens to do with the bed prep. If the bed prep is correct, then you can get away with 3 lines, because it hasn't been compacted, it hasn't been overworked. So it's a light ground, and the ground will let us put a little bit of extra water, and it'll spread. So that's how we end up doing the 3 lines. Once again, could this be one of those grounds? Yeah, it could be. I can probably get away with 3. If there was a little bit sandier ground, like we've had up on top, down here at the bottom a little bit more, then yeah, we go ahead and we do a 4. So we'll put 2 lines in the 5 lines of onions, and then we'll put 2 other lines in the other one. So it all depends. It's just one of those secrets that we shouldn't be giving away, but we try our hardest to do the best, to get the best water on there. And this year we were allowed to use a newer tape. Yep. So we're going to go ahead and put new tape on here. So once to say, we might be able to get away with 3 lines, but usually 4 is what it's recommended. We try to do 4, but if we can get away with 3, we can.
And that's 4 per 10 lines of onions.
Yes, yeah. So there's 2 lines in 5. And then you have a center of 3 inches. You have a center of 3 inches that has nothing there. And then you have the other 5, and we put 2 lines on that one. Yeah. So we do one, we put we'll count 2 lines of onions, and we'll put a drip tape, and then down the center we'll put another drip tape, and then on the other one 2 lines in, 2 lines from the end, bring it in, and it'll spread across just perfectly. It'll spread across, once again, depending on your bed prep. Up in the front, there's like a V, a little shovel in the front. It's a small little V, and it just does a small groove. It does a small groove in the ground, does one of these, and it'll start laying the tape right inside. Just enough for it's not moving a lot of dirt, but just enough to where it's laying it down. So nothing, it's just brushing everything out of off the sides.
Each year they're coming out with different types of drip tape, but I think for the most part we go with this tape. Is good for 3 years. We have used some other fields we could be using tape that every year we have to recycle it out. So it just depends what's in stock and what's in hand. For onions, generally we have it for 3 years. We don't have a problem with insects whatsoever. If anything, the shovel. Somebody accidentally, or a hoe coming in here if we have to get a hand crew through to get the weeds, they will hit the tape. But other than that, then we don't have any rodent problems with the tape at all. And one thing I wanted to mention before, we tried it with 3 drip lines. This was probably 5-6 years ago that they converted to 4 lines, so we get even coverage across the bed. Before with the 3 ones, we had to keep irrigating to get that good coverage. So with the 4 drip lines, we're able to, in a short amount of time, get that good full coverage across from one end of the bed to the other, or shoulder to shoulder.
Once the plants have grown sufficiently and the bulbs have sized, Rio Farms begins the harvest sequence. The plants are first topped using a mower to remove excess foliage. Since these particular onions will be further processed, the bulb skins are not dry, and the majority of tops have not fallen over. In preparation for mechanical harvesting, the bulbs are undercut, lifted, and 2 rows are combined into one using an implement called a windrower. The spinning rods at the front of the windrower break the roots and lift the bulbs from the ground. After undercutting, the bulbs from the 2 rows ride up a chain conveyor to be combined into a single row. This windrower is combining 2 sets of 2 rows into 2 adjacent rows. Windrowing occurs for onions destined for processing as well as retail markets. In many cases, mechanical harvesters are used to pick up the onion bulbs. This harvester harvests 2 lines of onions at a time and removes dirt and other debris before conveying the bulbs to an adjacent gondola. The harvester contains color sensors which are set to the color of the onion bulbs. Laborers on the machine remove damaged bulbs and dirt clods not removed by the color sorter. Anything not the color of the bulbs and damaged bulbs are returned to the ground. Topping precedes undercutting, which precedes windrowing, which precedes harvest. Onions often require curing, which is drying to set the skins and the cut tops of the bulbs. Curing can occur by simply allowing the windrowed onions to dry in the field, or the bulbs can be harvested, placed in bins, and covered to then cure. The many openings on the side of the bins allow airflow around the bulbs, and the burlap covering the bulbs prevents sunburn, which can render the bulbs unmarketable. Once cured, the bins will be placed on trucks to be brought to the packing house for sorting, sizing, and packing. Whether it's choosing seed, working the soil, laying drip tape, or harvesting the bulbs, every step of onion production is a carefully planned and executed process requiring diligence, attention to detail, and experience. California growers have these skills in abundance, and their efforts have allowed California to become a leading producer of high-quality onions for both the processing and retail markets.